A lot of us want to read more. We get book recommendations that we say we'll get later. We have stacks of books we mean to get to soon. But distractions get in the way, life gets in the way, and even when we do read, it often feels like we're making no progress to anything meaningful. I used to think the same way too, until I sat down to read a surprising statistic. The average CEO reads one book a week. And that got me thinking, if these CEOs who are earning more in a week than I probably earn in a year are spending that amount of time reading books, then maybe it's an important habit to develop. And more importantly, if they're able to find the time to do that every week, then why can't I as a college student do the same? So I went for it. I didn't have a plan or anything, I just knew that this was a challenge that I wanted to undertake and accomplish. I remember there was a book that someone had recommended to me before and I immediately just bought it. And once it arrived, I told myself I had 1 week to finish it. I felt so excited reading more books that I went ahead and bought more before I even finished this one. And before I knew it, the floodgates had opened. And slowly but surely, I did that for over 1 year. So, what exactly did I get out of it? How was I able to do it? And is this something that you need to do yourself? Hi everyone, my name is Pardue, and if you're new to the channel, I love talking about travel, life, and finance. And today I want to talk about one of the most life-changing habits that I've ever had, which was being able to read a book a week for over a year. Let's start with breaking down how this journey impacted me and how it can impact you. So the first thing is that you become way more multidimensional in your thinking. In school, right, especially within college, we tend to spend most of our time focused on courses that relate to our major. And even when I see people trying to expand by going into other separate courses of interest, they tend to still prioritize the course that they're taking related to their major. And even if you're really smart about this, right, that you really spend time trying to take these extra kind of courses that are related to the subjects, in my opinion, that's not really the best way you can push yourself to branch out in your knowledge. For example, one of my favorite books is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And funny enough, he's actually a UC Berkeley professor, the college that I go to, and he actually has a course available on the psychology of sleep that people can enroll in. But even considering that, I was able to read his book and digest probably most of the information that he shares in the course within 1 week, rather than taking up a course slot and spending a whole semester learning all of that material. Now, I'm sure the information in the book is distilled, but for me as a peripheral viewer who just wants to learn about sleep and get better at it, being able to read his book so quickly is definitely the best way that I can get that information. And of course, after that week is over, I get to explore another book on a completely new and different topic to further expand my breadth on things. I've been able to cover topics like law, health and sleep, personal finance, philosophy, leadership, communication, building businesses, and on and on and on. There's just so many books out there that there's no way you're not going to find a host of various topics that interest you. And all that reading really serves to give you a more holistic sense of your knowledge, while also helping you be a more lateral thinker, which I think is really underappreciated in the way that our education system works. Now, I'm a little biased due to this book called Range on that very subject, but I think being multidimensional in your thinking is a really powerful skill set to have, and reading a book a week is definitely the most powerful way, in my opinion, to achieve that. One of the most common questions I get asked when I usually mention how much I read is, well, what's your favorite book then? And 9 out of 10 times, the answer to that question is pretty simple. The book that I'm reading right now. Now, I was being quite selective in making sure that the books that I was getting were ones that I was sure were good. But really what it was is that as I was reading them, I felt like I was taking a deep dive into an author's life and the lessons that they have gained along the way. Very frequently I'm taking in these new ideas, and each page I have to take a step back to ponder what it means, how it can change my perspective on things, and how I can implement it into my own life to create actionable change. Atomic Habits made me rethink how my environment shapes my behavior. I Will Teach You to Be Rich makes me work diligently on my relationship with money. And darn if David Goggins and Elon Musk aren't the craziest people on the planet right now. As I'm reading each book, I can feel the lasting impression that it's making on me, and recognize and I'm very excited about the changes that I know are going to happen after I take action. And with each new one, I continue to gain more and more that I want to take into my life. Which leads me to my third point. I remember one particular week in college where I had 3 midterms in the span of 1 week, and normally that would be a really hectic and stressful week, but I actually remember it as being one of the best weeks of that semester. And the reason for that is because I read one of my all-time favorite books, The Untethered Soul. I still continued my book a week even while I had all those tests going on, and weirdly enough, I think it actually helped me through the tests. I didn't view them as this grand force that I had to overcome, and only after that week would I really be able to enjoy myself and feel free. I already felt very, very free because as I was reading these books, I felt like there was a much larger perspective to my learning and education. Yes, those tests are important, and I certainly had to take the time to be able to study for them and do well. But being able to read a life-changing book that week sort of put things into perspective where I didn't overvalue these tests. I just kind of saw them as passing things that I needed to take care of, almost like a to-do list. I think the reason this becomes really challenging is because, like I said, oftentimes we get very siloed into narrow paths in life where we tend to over-prioritize certain things like an upcoming test, project, etc. as if that is the biggest event that is going on. But when you engage yourself in something really, really important to you outside of that, it helps give you a larger perspective on things, and also just not spending too much mental focus and anxiety on these tests. So yeah, ultimately I think a habit like this really helps give perspective in maintaining the long-term and infinite game that we're all kind of playing in our lives. I would say one of the most important aspects of this habit is to actually make a mental commitment to yourself to do it. For me personally, I never thought to myself I needed to spend X amount of time per day to finish a book or read this many pages. I just told myself when I started I was going to get this book and I had 1 week to do it, and I just had to figure out a way to do it. Most often people get stuck in this world of wondering how they can manage to make the time to do something, and that's usually the first question that I get when people want to understand how to do it. But the truth is the time really is there. It's just that it's hard to figure out where it is if we have other commitments or we've never really organized our time before. So by making a commitment to yourself that you are going to finish a book in a week, you've sort of taken the decision out of your hands. You end up finding a way just on your own to make sure that you meet that deadline. And by the way, that doesn't mean it's actually a bad thing if you don't manage to finish the book in a week. And I mean, I've certainly had weeks where I wasn't able to meet my deadline for the book. But then I would go higher level and saying that I need to read a book a week on average, which meant making up for that difference later. So yeah, especially for something like this, which is naturally going to seem very time consuming, you want to make that commitment first, and trust me, you will find the time when you do so. And one of the next things you gotta do is to find some interesting books. Now, that may seem like an obvious tip, but really take the time to look for books that intrigue you or exploring topics that you want to learn about. When you're deciding which book to read next, you really want to look at it and feel excited by it, that you can't wait to finish the one that you're on right now to move on to the next one. Because when you have that kind of anticipation, you're just going to keep on reading and reading and reading, and really taking in the actual knowledge. And even more so, if you end up picking up a book and decide that you're not actually enjoying it, just move it aside and try to find another one. It's not worth your time to try to read through a book that you're not actually enjoying, because you're probably not actually taking in any interesting information, and it's just going to end up you putting yourself off from actually getting through the book and on to the next one. It's okay to stop a book, but you gotta make sure to continue reading. Now, the last thing I would really recommend is to read in an environment without any distractions. It's just so hard to stay focused on, a book nowadays when you have cell phones, tablets, and laptops. And I think this is a product of the fact that when we are reading a book, it takes some focus to read it. But also when we want to think about what we are just reading, ponder about it and see how it fits into our life and how it affects our perspective, that requires a lot of deep and meaningful thought. And because of that, it's very easy for our brain to just default to looking at something else. So when you remove these distractions, I tend to turn my phone in airplane mode, or maybe I'm sitting in a different room altogether with nothing but me and my book. That means that you can really focus on going deep into what you're reading. And finally, and probably the most ironic point, is don't actually take the fact of reading a book a week too seriously. Even if you're just reading more and you manage to take one line a week, one line that affects the way you think, the way you interact with others, and your general behavior, that in and of itself is really a life-changing habit, right? So what I would really say is use this habit and commitment as a way to explore novel and interesting ideas and see how they can impact your life. And it really doesn't matter how much of a book you read, but as long as you take in a few good ideas each time, you're going to end up with a life-changing habit one way or another. So yeah, let me know where your reading journey takes you, however that may be. If you need any book recommendations, check out my personal reading list that's on my website. Link is in the description below. Subscribe and stay tuned for more, especially if you want to know how I read about getting complimentary lounge access at airports, looking at this video right here.